Okay, so I think we can start. Here we are with Michael and Martin. They will talk us about systemd in Jessie and how to survive in stretch. So please welcome them warmly.
Hello. So, hello everyone. We're glad to be here. Thanks for coming. This is Michael Wiebel. I'm Martin Pitt, and we are the current maintainers of systemd in Debian, and I also maintain it in Ubuntu. So we want to review the challenges that we had with the systemd migration in Jessie, and also take a look at some planned and potential changes for Stretch. And of course, show you how to get involved. So big thanks to Tolle Forkheen and Michael Stapelberg, who did a great job of maintaining systemd in the past. Unfortunately, they don't have time anymore. Also thanks to Marco Dietri, the former UDEF maintainer, who is still around for answering questions and giving some advice. And also to several contributors like Didier Roche, who really helped us to crack some tough nuts like the FS-check integration, and to some new contributors like Philippe Sartela, who are starting to get involved. But we always need more help. So this shows a rough timeline of bringing systemd into Debian. So the discussions about switching to a more modern init systems really started already in 2007 with Upstart at the time, of course. Systemd wasn't around yet. And since then, we've seen an ever-increasing pressure from some upstreams and administrators to use features like lognd or the journal. And towards the end of 2013, the pressure finally got high enough to seriously propose a switch. And I hadn't actually been a Debian systemd maintainer until then, so I was following the big technical committee discussion with great interest, especially since I was involved in the boot stack and plumbing stack on the Ubuntu side, and I was one of the systemd proponents. So Debian fought with itself for many, many months at the time. And we all still remember that bad time when, like, essentially all technical development stopped, and we went into these great flame wars, and some external participants even proclaimed that this would be the end of all freedom and choice, and we are all going to be enslaved and so on. But in this context, kudos to the technical committee who, despite of all this noise, remained a really rational and facts-based research to this. And even though the final decision was very close, as we all know, it was very well founded. And I think in the end, we reached the right decision. And fortunately, most of these unfounded complaints and rants in the Debian systemd community wore off by then. And the political discussion essentially died. And people realized, hey, life goes on, and my computer still boots, and we could all go back to our technical work. But then the real work only started for us, because we did the switch only a few months before the Jessie release. And this is like a huge transition. So there was work for us to make Jessie releasable. And Michael will now explain us some details about that.
So in the end, it actually turned out to be not that big of a deal when the social aspects of the transition died down. So to actually do the transition, we already had a package in Wheezy, which worked of systemd in Wheezy, and that worked quite okay. At the time the decision was made, we had a package in Jessie, which worked quite okay. But to do the actual switch of the default init system meant we had to deal with making sysvinit actually replaceable. And that wasn't actually that easy, because sysvinit is a so-called essential package. That means you can just easily remove that package without getting this nice, oh, do you really want to remove that package and shoot yourself in the footnote by depackage your app? So what we decided to do was to split up sysvinit and make the old sysvinit package a transitional package, and move the contents of the old package into sysvinit core. But you really want to ensure that you always have an init system installed. So we introduced a new meta package, an essential meta package called init, and let that new package depend on sysvinit, and which triggered the actual migration to the new default init system. So after we've done the switch, we actually thought, hey, people can now actually switch between multiple init systems for the first time, really, in Debian. That also means maybe if you switch between, say, sys5 init and systemd, you want to keep the state between those systems in sync. Say you have a service A under sysv init, you disable it, you later decide to switch to systemd, and at least I would expect that the service state would be transitioned over to the system. So we did quite a lot of effort and work and make it possible for users to easily switch between those two systems. It also meant additional complexity for us, because if you can't rely on the systemctl tools always being around, you have to adjust your maintainer scripts, for example. And we re-implemented parts of the system D interfaces in a package called init system helpers. And if you use the hsystemd, which we created along the way, then you ensure that your package can be installed under sys5 init and still enable all the services. So this was one part, but it also one of the deciding factors of actually switching to systemd was that console kit, an essential component of today's desktop, had been deprecated over the years, and we needed a replacement. And systemd login really provided nice interfaces, and this was one of the reasons why upstreams like GNOME decided to switch to login. And since we wanted to really support sysv init, we needed a solution for that as well. So we introduced a package called systemd-shim, which was first introduced in Ubuntu. We used that in Debian as well, which provides just enough API from systemd to make systemd login run under sysv init. So you still need parts of systemd, but you can run sysv init even when using a desktop nowadays. So another aspect which we decided early on was if we do the switch from sysv init to systemd, we didn't want to support all the old config files sysv init used, etc default, rcs, etc-init and stuff like that. The major reason for that was that we would have to carry a patch for that for all eternity. And more importantly, people coming from other distros, people who are used to systemd, would have a different experience on Debian, and we didn't want that. So for settings which we thought were sensible and feasible to do, we did a one-time migration and moved that over. And still, there was lots of integration work to do. For example, I mean, there's muscle memory, you type etc-init service start, and we still wanted to do the right thing here and to create the LSB hook for that. And I think we succeeded, at least I hope, so that people actually don't realize that they're using systemd. Actually, this happened quite often, that people are coming to us and say, hey, I want to use systemd, and we tell them, hey, you're already using it. So I think we kind of succeeded that. Another aspect some users aren't aware is that we actually did switch the default also on upgrades. And that sounds scary at first, but we decided to do that to make new installation and upgraded installations as close as possible. And as this is a scary thing to do, we decided to keep a fallback. So the sysv init, the transitional sysv init package we introduced earlier, was repurposed a little bit, and it provides a fallback sysv init binary, which can easily be used, and you can select that in your grep boot prompt to boot that in case there would have been a problem on upgrades and you get your old sysv init back. So this shows a backgraph of our systemd package in Debian. And it starts around August 2014 when the actual switch of the default was made in SID. And as you may know, we released, and there was a steady increase until the end of 2014. And as you may know, the actual release of Jessie was in April. And we actually expected there would be a flow of bug reports, but that actually didn't happen. And so we're kind of surprised by that. There were some hard bug reports and to track down, but in the end, all those issues were fixable. And I regularly also try to follow the Debian user and Debian user German mailing lists and see if users are having problems and trying to help them and try to understand what kind of problems they have. And so far, it has been pretty well. I think after the flame wars had died down, Debian use, for example, became usable again. to watch. So the most important issue users are, at least what I found users are having with systemd is that systemd is stricter in certain regards. For example, if you have obsolete FS-type entries, systemd opts for correctness instead of sysvinit, which usually tries to hide errors. And Martin has an example here where this is causing problems.
Yeah, so this really helped us a lot to discover bugs which were years old. So my prime example there is the eCryptFS setup swap, which promises you to set up an encrypted swap so that if you encrypt your home directory, you wouldn't leak your data to the swap partition. And it turns out years ago, we made some errors there, in fact, several. And this turned out that for years, we were actually installing systems which either didn't have any swap at all, or even worse, which had an unencrypted swap where we inspected an encrypted one. And since neither Upstart or sys5init actually told you about this, we ran for this for years, and now systemd will complain and say, hey, you tried to configure a swap partition here, but it's not there, so it tells you and gives you the chance to correct that in the emergency system. But yeah, then let's look forward to the future a little bit. One rather intrusive change that already landed in Stretch is the change of the persistent network interface names. In the old system, we just remembered the original relatively random kernel name as it appeared the first time with a particular MAC address, and then created dynamic UDEF rules which would assign it the same name on all subsequent plugs or reboots. But there were several problems with that. It was inherently racy. You sometimes ended up with interface names called rename1. And it was disabled for all the virtual machine interfaces and henceforth also in the cloud. And it didn't really work with things like read-only root. And if you wanted to create an image which you then want to roll out to like thousands of identical machines, then you got unpredictable names again, because the pre-generated rules would, of course, not match any of those machines except one. So in the new system, we never use the kernel names to avoid this kind of race. And we now have a declarative and rather flexible naming policy with, I think, sensible defaults. And you see how they look like now. And of course, it will take some time to get used to these. But we survived changing FS-tab to your UIDs and similar things in the past, so it's just a transitional pain, and I believe this is finally a better default. But of course, if you don't like it, you can tweak the policy or just entirely disable it to just retain the original kernel names. An important thing is that this will not be done for upgrades, because the interface names might be hidden in like firewall configuration scripts and so on. There is no way we can transition automatically. So this only applies to new installs. Another new thing is networkd. This is a small and lean service to bring up network interfaces, which was designed from the ground up for hot pluggy and virtual server world. So its configuration is similar in the abstraction level and spirit to IF up down. So you won't have too much trouble with that. But you don't need any extra packages or huge shell scripts to set up bridges and VLANs and bonds. And unlike IF up down, it works perfectly well with hot plugging. And it specifically is not meant to be a network manager replacement. So a network manager will continue to be around on desktops. Particularly, it has excellent support for Wi-Fi and dynamic reconfiguration through dbus and that stuff, which networkd doesn't aim to. You can use it right now in Debian, perfectly well working, but there is no integration with other Debian packages so far. In particular, it does not call ifup.d script, and there is no integration with packages like resolve-conf. These two are things which we really want to work on to make the transition easier.
So another ongoing effort is the removal of etc, rcsd, sysvinit scripts. These are the ones which are run through early boot. And these are also the ones which cause the most issues, because usually those are the ones which generate dependency cycles. So there's a new contributor called Felipe Sate who got interested, and we guided him in working on that. And he worked on a linting check, and should you watch out for that linting check, should your package be flagged by that, expect a bug very soon, because we intend to do a mass bug filing soonishly. And yeah. Some things we might do, some things we might not do for stretch is KDBus. And KDBus is for you who didn't hear about that yet, KDBus is a Linux kernel implementation of the dbus IPC protocol, which is a general purpose protocol coming from the desktop. And there were several attempts over the years to bring that to the kernel. In our view, the real core benefits of having dbus in the kernel is having it available during the whole lifetime of the system, during early boot and late shutdown. So far, KDBus hasn't been merged yet in the upstream kernel. It might be proposed for 4.3, and I would say it has good chances to be merged, and we'll see how that goes. At least, coming to the user space part, you also need a component which sets up KDBus. Currently, systemd is the only user space implementation for that, and actually systemd in testing and SID is already able to set up KDBus. And KDBus is also available as an out-of-tree module. So you could easily build KDBus, test it on your system, and it's actually so easy to do that we decided to create a DKMS module, prepared it today and uploaded it, and this laptop actually is running KDBus today. There will be some issues, but if you want to try it, I think we're going to upload it to experimental. Just install the DKMS package and test it and report bugs. So two other interesting issues which we don't have time to go into are presets, which could be interested for derivatives who don't want a different set of packages to be installed, and systemd boot, which is a very simple boot loader for EFI.
Right. And then there is further changes which the two of us don't actually plan working on, but which would nevertheless be interesting projects if someone else is interested, then please come and talk to us. One of these would be using systemd in the init ramfs. Right now, init ramfs tools uses a kind of a homegrown shell-based init system, and it could be replaced by systemd init, which would ease the handover between init ramfs and the real operating system, and also avoid some race conditions. And you also get nice things like you have the entire boot in the journal, and it's much easier to debug init ramfs and stuff. This could also be influenced by the decision whether we actually keep init ramfs tools or move to Dracut. There was a buffer about that on Monday, but at this point in time, it's not quite clear yet where we go. And the next thing is the deb helper integration, which pretty much affects all the package maintainers who ship unit files. You will be very familiar with the usual trinity of dhsystemd enable and dh install init and then dhsystemd start, which feels a bit clumsy because this was kind of bolted onto the side at the time. But now that systemd is the primary init system, I think it's really time to unify all that and simplify it again. Okay. And so thanks for the warning. So I'll skip some bits here. And finally, with something else which affects all of us is to actually make use of all the shiny features that systemd offers to us. So using timers and paths and socket activation or security confinement. With just 2 extra lines in a unit file, you can actually restrict your service to be much more like a confined container and having great isolation. And so far, we don't really exploit that a lot.
So in case you got interested in any of these topics, please come and talk to us. And you can reach us on this mailing list or on IRC. We are there and just poke us. But you can also just help filing bug reports, working on bug reports. And if you want to hack on systemd itself, systemd is managed in Git on Alioth via Git build package. And as a closing note, if you want, there's a BOF tomorrow, which we try to show you, just in case you have problems with systemd, how you can debug those problems. So thanks for your attention, and I'm not sure if I have time for 1 or 2 questions. So thanks again.
We are a bit late, but we can ask for a couple of questions.
Started a little late, but yeah, should be okay.
You mentioned network D. Why should I use that, and what is it good for?
You take that, Martin?
Yeah. Well, as I said, it is mostly useful to have a very small solution which covers all the server-side cloudy virtual interfaces, because they, unlike IF up-down, where everything comes in different packages and isn't very well integrated, the daemon basically sorts out all the race conditions, correct bring up of nested interfaces, and so on.
The important part about network D is that it's event-based. It sees devices coming and go. IF up-down is started during boot, and then it's done. And so it sits a little bit in between of if up-down and network manager. So.
I would just like to thank you deeply, because I don't think many people realize the pressure and the shitstorm you have been through. And I'm very grateful for your work. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No. Thank you. Okay, well then, thanks everyone. Oh, well,
There's one more.
not sure if we still have time, but okay.
What about systemd and DI?
I had that on the notes. I tried not to do it to not upset Cyril too much. Well, it's essentially the same story. If it's the shell-based homegrown init system, and in theory one could think about replacing that with systemd, I have no idea whether that would make a lot of sense or bring a lot of improvement. We just didn't look into it at all.
If anyone is interested in looking into that, you're more than welcome.
But I think the higher priority should be the init ramfs, because that happens all the time, while installing just happens once, and it's like less visible.
I'm not sure whether it is easy to answer that in this auditorium, but how did you manage to keep your health when dealing with this upstream?
Well, actually, upstream, I find him pretty well to work with. So, I mean, he has a clear mind. He speaks his mind, and I think he's honest about what he says. And sometimes people don't like that, and maybe he comes off as sometimes as abrasive. But actually, we have a pretty good relationship with upstream.
And I also must say, Leonard really learned to become a really great maintainer. So he dutifully reviews patches, and of course he's very picky, and that's good. Technical excellence helps us all. But like, he's not discriminating because we come from Debian or Ubuntu or whatnot. And now, I mean, the systemd is far more than just Leonard by now. There are, like, the core team is like 5-6 people, and by now there's hundreds of contributors who send more than 20-30 patches. So it's really a big community project these days. Yeah,
and he actually asks us if there's stuff that is upcoming. Then he says, oh, do you have some input from the Debian side? So at least I feel included in the decision process.
And we upstream committers, so in theory, we could break stuff ourselves, but of course, we always go through the review process. And
So you just talked about removing the S renewable scripts.
Oh.
I know, because I worked a bit on OpenRC, not as much as I wanted, but anyway, I know that it's full of hacks that we build up over time. I'm just curious, if you want to remove them, then what's going to happen to sys5 init?
Well, you don't remove them. You just add support for systemd with native service file. You don't remove the RCSD init scripts when doing that.
Okay.
But we need to have init scripts by policy, so we can't do this. Yeah.
So I'm not sure how we are with time, and give the other ones time to prepare. So I think we should stop at this point. Right. So thanks again for coming, and you can meet us outside in the hall.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.